Welcome to the Wellness in a Chaotic World podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl Davis. Before we dive in, I wanted to note that as a health and wellness coach, I can support you in making sustainable lifestyle changes, tuning into your own wisdom, and building habits that align with your values and vision for your well being. I don't prescribe or treat health conditions, as I'm not a doctor or a mental health professional. Instead, I can walk alongside you as you create a healthier life on your terms. From time to time, I share conversations with guests. The views and opinions expressed by those guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect my views or those of anyone associated with wellness in a chaotic world. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and isn't a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always talk to your doctor or qualified mental health provider about any physical or mental health concerns. This is the Wellness in a Chaotic World podcast, a place where we're having conversations about what it really takes to live well in our unhealthy, chaotic world. I'm your host, Cheryl Davis. If you're beating yourself up over a bag of chips you ate in a stressed out frenzy, or you can't figure out how anyone manages to find the time to even think about wellness, you're in the right place. We talk about all of these things and more because, frankly, we don't talk to each other enough about what we're really up against every day. Let's change that right now. Today, my guest is Marina Krivonossova. Marina is a content marketing specialist, and she is the founder of the B2B content marketing agency called Retold. Marina actually found this podcast through LinkedIn, and she reached out to me and she pitched a couple of ideas about how we could talk about, balancing being productive at work with managing your health and some of the pressures that we face to sacrifice our well-being for the sake of, not necessarily even productivity, but for the sake of just being present in the office. She also talked about how there can be red flags to look out for when you're assessing whether a job is right for you. And I thought that was very interesting. And, the challenges that we face in the workplace are a very important topic. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. We get into things like how, success is not always a linear path, and the courage to pursue your dreams, like starting a new business, focusing on doing something that you're excited to do because it gives you more energy, and putting systems into place at the beginning of anything that you start so that your efforts can be sustainable. We also talk about things like guilt and manipulation in the workplace. And one of the interesting things that we talk about too is how to stop overthinking and actually be a better communicator no matter where you are working. So I really hope you enjoy today's episode. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Cheryl.
So you're a content marketing specialist. Tell us about your career and how you started.
So I got my start in a pretty unconventional way, I would say. To give you a little backstory, I moved to the US when I was very little, moved with my family from Russia, and both of my parents are very kind of STEM-focused people. So it was always seen that I'd become a computer scientist, an engineer, a doctor, something like that. And that's always the direction I was pushed in since I was young. And I enjoyed it. I was good at math. I was good at programming. I did that for a while. But there was always something in me that was like, I want to be creative. And when I casually mentioned it around my family, I was like, oh, maybe I want to be an author. It was like, oh, yeah, you can do that on the side. Like, that's a great hobby to have. They always encouraged it. I wanted to do art classes. They let me do art classes. I wanted to play piano. I played piano. They always supported me when I won awards writing little books and stories at school. So it's not like it wasn't allowed, but it was just a thing to do on the side. And when I was old enough to start working, I started picking up marketing gigs without realizing what marketing was. So I was doing things like social media management. I was, doing email marketing, managing newsletters, creating copy for websites. But again, it was a thing I did on the side that I got paid for, that I was good at, that I enjoyed, but it was always outside of my studies in math or computer science. And eventually I started studying economics, which slowly turned into international relations for a whole separate story. And I ended up getting my master's in political science, which I enjoyed, which I genuinely wanted to do. But living in the Netherlands as a Russian American who didn't speak Dutch, who didn't have EU citizenship, it just wasn't possible. And I was looking at what I wanted to do because I did want to stay in the Netherlands and in Europe, at least for some time. And I was like, so what are my options? And I realized, why not marketing? And until then, I had never really imagined it as a full-time career, just again, something to do on the side. But the opportunity came to start doing it full time. And I was like, oh, I took a step back and I was like, people are going to pay me for this. People actually want me to do this. And I told my family, and I think my dad was like, I don't even know what marketing is. My mom was much more supportive, but she was like, I don't quite know where marketing is either. Like, what do you actually do? What do you do for 40 hours a week? Which was pretty funny. But yeah, that's how I found my place in marketing. And when I was launching my own company at the end of 2023, I kind of settled on B2B content marketing because I wanted to niche down. Obviously, that makes you more reliable if you're not doing a million things at once. And this was the thing that I realized I'm good at, I enjoy, and that's actually valuable. And there's a demand for it in the market.
That's interesting. I mean, I think we all have similar stories where our families sort of try to, it's well-meaning most of the
Hmm.
time. They want the best for us, and so they're saying, well, this is where we've always had success.
Yeah,
And so they push us toward that, not necessarily taking into consideration what I guess like I'd say our fundamental skills and interests are, and that there
it's,
could
yeah.
be something else out there for us. And it's like I had the same type of experience where at one point I was kind of unhappy in the career I was in. I was like, it would be great to be an author, a children's book author. And I went to my mother and I was like, she's like, but what are you actually going to do for money?
Yeah,
So,
I get it.
like, wah, wah. So you said you started your own marketing agency. So how did that come about and why did you choose to go that direction?
That was also random. I feel like my whole life and career, just a series of, oh, that was an accident, that was random, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So, again, a little backstory. I always knew I wanted to have my own business. I knew I wanted to be my own boss and work with different clients. I just didn't know how it would manifest. I thought at one point, maybe I'll start a bakery. Maybe, I'll do this, I'll do that. At one point, when I was doing programming, I was like, maybe I'll have my own computer software company. So I didn't know what it would look like. And I didn't know when or where, but I knew it would happen. And I think everybody around me who knew me also kind of expected that. And it wasn't until I believe it was September 2023, a completely random connection on LinkedIn is ultimately what pushed me to starting my own company. Because I met this person who was speaking at a conference in the Netherlands, and he was like, hey, I have free tickets. Do you want to go? It's like a marketing thing. You're a marketer. I thought maybe, you'd vibe with it. And I went to that event, I heard him speak, and we were talking afterwards. And he just started his own business a few months ago. And I kind of opened up and I was like, I'm not too happy in my career, but I don't know what it is. Like, I like my job, I like my coworkers, but something's missing. Like, something just feels off. I'm not happy. And he was like, you sound like someone who kind of wants to start their own business. And I was like, this guy who just met me says that. I'm like, how do you know? How do you know my dark secret? So we talked about it more, and I had just agreed to renew my contract at my full-time company. So it was really a weird situation, like literally days before that. But we kind of had that back and forth, and I went home just thinking about it nonstop. And I brought the idea up like just casually with my husband. I was like, what if we just like, quit my job? And he was like, well, why would you do that? And I was like, well, to like start my own company. And he's like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Like you've always kind of been that kind of person. And I was like, really? Okay. So it's not as crazy maybe as I think it is. And I brought it up with my mom. That's still my favorite story to tell because we were on the phone, so I couldn't see her. And she was just quiet. And she goes, I think I'm going to cry. And I was like, no, marketing isn't that horrible. And she goes, no, I'm just so happy for you. And I was like, oh, okay. It's the good kind of cry. And my dad, the big STEM guy, the big tech guy who moved us across the whole world to follow his tech career, I told him and I was really like, oh man, what's he gonna say? And he also paused and he goes, are you looking for investors? And I was like, oh, I was like, okay, I love that. I love everyone's on board with it. Like, even if they weren't, I would do it because that's just how I am. But at the same time, it's great that the people I love and the people I'm closest to were like, yeah, obviously you were made for this, like about time. And I really said to myself, it's now or never. Because I was scared, of course, and I was worried, and I was like, I'm leaving behind something that's pretty stable or seemingly stable at least to pursue something, completely random and unpredictable. But again, I was like, if not now, then when? In 5 years, in 10 years, I'm going to keep making the same excuses and I'm going to keep being miserable and telling random people at conferences how miserable I am. So it's time to move away from that. And yeah, I just went for it.
That is awesome. I love that you ultimately had the support for it, because that it makes a big difference, I think, for
Hmm.
people. So when you were deciding what to do, I feel like that must have taken a lot of courage. Even though you knew you were meant for it, it must have taken quite a bit of like soul seeking and just understanding yourself and who you were and digging deep for that courage to just take a leap.
Definitely, but at the same time, it was the first thing I was excited for professionally in a very long time. Like every start at a new company, I was excited, of course, and I was very happy that I had that opportunity. But very quickly it would wear off. And again, I was happy to be there. And even if everything was great, like nothing was objectively wrong, something was missing. But when I started working on my own company, even just the planning, even the things that are objectively pretty boring, like narrowing down your offer and figuring out pricing and, doing all of the documentation and going to the Chamber of Commerce to get your numbers and stuff. I was doing those things and I was hyped. I was really like, this is it. I'm so excited. And I was always the person who was like, I work 40 hours a week. I'm getting my results and I'm not going to work more. I'm not going to check my email on holiday, none of that. But with my own company, I remember telling my husband, like, hey, just so you know, for the first few months, I will be working evenings, I will be working weekends. So, don't search for me. I'm in my office. And it wasn't because I felt pressured or obligated. It's because I was genuinely excited to do it. So just having that shift kind of gave me more courage that I felt like I might have not initially had.
Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. If you find something that you really love and want to put the effort into it, it just makes putting the energy into it that much easier. Yeah. So that being said though, like you're talking about a lot more hours, putting a lot more effort in. How do you balance that with the rest of life?
So for me personally, it was a lot at the beginning, especially when again, I was figuring out how do I position myself in the market? How do I do promo? Where do I find clients? But as time went on, and I really mean like a couple months, I started working much less than I was working previously. So at the moment, I mean, about 10 months in, I'm definitely working way less than I would have been if I was doing something similar full time, if I was making as much as I'm making on a full time basis. So for me, it's about working out those systems, putting them in place early on so that you can relax later. I know there's plenty of founders who are like on year 5 and they're hustling, they're doing 80 hours a week. But that's not why I ventured out on my own. I'm not here to be the next, Bill Gates or something. I'm not here to become a multi-billionaire. I'm here to give myself and my family and my loved ones a sustainable life. I'm not here to become wealthy beyond anyone's wildest dreams. I'm here to be able to afford the lifestyle that I want for myself and those close to me. And that includes travel and that includes taking long vacations. And that's just what I need and what I want to be happy. So I keep that in the back of my mind every time I, decide what to do with my company. And people have asked me, like, are you going to hire full-time employees? Are you going to grow? Are you going to scale? And probably not, because to me, that's going to be a whole lot more work to give myself a life that I don't really want. So I'm just not interested in that.
That's awesome that you are really aligning your own business with the lifestyle that you're seeking.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like a lot of people dream about having their own business because they feel certain pressures in the workplace that they just aren't a fit for our wellness.
Yeah.
I mean, have you had experiences with that?
Oh, have I ever? How much time do we have today? I've had so many of those experiences. So, one that comes to mind, I worked at this company where, again, I was initially very excited to work there, and they really emphasize, we value our companies and our team's well-being. We make sure that everyone's healthy, everyone's happy. And when I got there, the words did not align with the actions. So while they would say, we care about your well-being, we want you to be happy, I'd go into the office and then I'd be like, all right, guys, I'm leaving for the day. And they'd be like, oh, but we have this big event next week. And I'd be like, okay, well, yes, but it's already 6. And, I'd like to go home and, spend time with my friends and family today. And they're like, yeah, but don't you care about like your work family? And it was that kind of approach where they guilt you into something where they wouldn't directly call you out and be like, you're not putting in the effort. We want you to work more. But they'd guilt you and they'd manipulate you and they'd really commend you for putting in those extra unpaid hours and neglecting your family and friends. And I know there were people at work who'd be like, yeah, I haven't seen my partner in a few days actually, because I just leave so early and come back so late. And other people would be like, oh, yeah, well, I haven't seen my partner in weeks. And I was like, weird flex. Like, I'm so sorry for your partner and your kids and anyone else who's missing you. That's horrible. And just seeing that and experiencing it and having it shift from experiencing that guilt and manipulation on a regular basis to realize that, oh no, I'm crying at work. And oh no, now I'm crying every day because of work. It was a realization that like this isn't normal, this isn't healthy. Everyone says, like, oh, I enjoy being a kid, life gets hard when you're an adult, but it shouldn't be that hard. Like no matter what you tell me, I will not believe that is the norm that we all have to accept.
I agree. I mean, that's so true. There's so many stories that culturally we tell each other, and for some reason it just gets into our psyche and we run with it until
Hmm.
I feel like until we break.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like that. So what kind of what should we look for when if you're looking at a new job or you're looking for something new? Are there things that we can see before we get into those situations, do you think?
So what I would really advise, and this is specifically something where you have to make an effort, if you're really curious about what it's like working somewhere, don't be shy about reaching out to the people who currently work there on LinkedIn, something like that. And I know it's not something people often think of. They're thinking, I want to contact the hiring manager, the department manager, but reach out to somebody who works there. I've not only done that, I've had people who reach out to me and are like, hey, I saw you work there, you worked there. Well, how did you like it? And you don't have to, be accusatory from the start. You don't have to be like, how many hours a week do you work? Have you ever been forced to work overtime? Do you feel manipulated? It doesn't have to be like that. You just start that conversation, be like, hey, your company where you work looks super cool, or that company you were at before. I'd love to know more about your experiences there. If you're open to chatting for 15 minutes or just sending me a message, you make it as easy as possible for them and get their insights. And you would be surprised about how honest people are. Even when I was interviewing for this role, I don't know when, some time ago, the girl I was talking to, I asked, I was like, I'm looking for a place with a comfortable office because I do like working from the office sometimes. And she goes, oh, our office is horrible. And then she caught herself and she goes, no, 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 but like everything else is good. And I was laughing. I was like, that just slipped out, no questions asked. You know what I mean? So just having those open, friendly conversations is a great way to get insights into what you can expect. That's the first thing that I would really say to focus on. And besides that, look at their turnover rates. You can actually see those on LinkedIn as well, because more often than not, people update their position at a company, and LinkedIn on a company page will show you that data. And they'll show you the turnover rate, the average tenure, the average time someone spends at a company. And that's so interesting because it's funny, the company that I had a horrible experience with, their headcount is decreasing year by year. And I was like, I wonder why that is. And another company where I had a positive experience, I look and their headcount is increasing and the average tenure is quite long. So it's one of those things where those numbers do matter, and you might not initially be inclined to look for them, but they're there and they're hard to make up,
Yeah, I never would have thought of like checking the stats on LinkedIn. But
right?
yeah, but that makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So let's say you're already in a job and you're starting to notice that it the reality isn't matching what you thought you would be
Hmm.
getting. What are some of the things that you would suggest people do um, for, I guess, managing that? Because if you don't necessarily want to jump to the next job, or you can't necessarily jump to the next
Hmm.
job, you're having trouble finding something else. How would you suggest managing that time while you're in a situation that's not ideal?
The way that I would approach it is first off, disconnect emotionally. At the end of the day, people will say, oh, your job is like your second family and all that other stuff. It's not. It is just a job. and don't let it feel like it's more than that. It's not worth sacrificing your health for, your mental well-being, your physical well-being. It's not worth any of it. So if you catch yourself about to cry over it, it's not worth it. I've cried enough. I can tell you that as an expert. It's never worth it. It'll never fix anything and it won't make you feel any better. So really do as much as you can to disconnect emotionally. And it's not an overnight process. You can't, unfortunately, just dictate yourself and be like, that's it, I've disconnected, we're done. But really remind yourself every day you start to get emotional over what's happening. Your boss was rude to you. This was unpleasant. Lunch break was awful. Whatever happened, it's just a job. And you're going to go home and don't dwell on it because they don't pay you to dwell on it when you go home. You know what I mean? That's your time that you shouldn't be letting your job take away from you because you had a negative experience. So that's the first thing I would say, making sure you have that emotional disconnect. And second of all, open communication. If you're noticing, you're being manipulated into staying overtime, again, don't go to your manager and be like, you're manipulating me. This is toxic. I see red flags everywhere. But open those communication lines and be like, hey, I just wanted to see if we could talk about my experience here. I've really been enjoying working with you, with our department, but I do find that I'm regularly putting in extra hours that I'm not being compensated for. As much as I support what we do, as much as I want our company to thrive, I'm noticing that I'm not seeing my family as much as I'd like. My health isn't where I'd like to be because I'm not able to take care of myself because, we only have the same 24 hours in the day. So just approach it with kind of tact, politeness, and always keep in mind that, your manager cares about the company succeeding very likely. They're making you work more because they want to achieve results. But you have to remind them in a civil way that happy employees, healthy employees are the ones that are going to get you results. So I think it's about having that emotional disconnect, but at the same time, opening those lines for communication. Those are two things that have worked for me in situations where I either couldn't leave a job immediately or just didn't want to jump ship because I thought there might be room to fix it.
Well, that's a good point. Sometimes there is room to fix it.
Yeah.
A culture may be a little off, but not necessarily full on toxic, although those do exist as well.
Of course, of course. And some people don't even realize it. I've also noticed the situations where it'll just be, maybe a head of a department who doesn't really want to rush home. They're happy working on all the time. And I worked with someone like that. So they just forgot, which is horrible, but they forgot that other people aren't like that. And when I confronted them and I was like, hey, well, I'd really like to make sure that I'm home for dinner every day. They were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I was just so involved in the project. I'm so sorry. Thanks for bringing it up. And instead of me just jumping ship or crying about it or disappearing, I just took a deep breath. I had that conversation. I opened those lines and it worked out positively. And, they were super understanding. I didn't have to work those insane hours anymore and it all worked out well. So you'd be surprised at what can happen when you just have those conversations. I think a lot of people forget that when they get caught up in the emotional side of it.
Yeah. So really, a lot of it comes down to communication skills.
Mhm.
And, you know, some of us, you may tell yourself, oh, I'm not great at communicating. That's something you can work on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to be a horrible communicator. I was always that person in my head, and I was scared of having those conversations because I just played out in my head how I thought they'd go. So in that specific example, my head would be like, "Oh, you're gonna tell them that you don't want to work extra, and they're gonna tell you you're lazy and fire you." And I'd be like crying before the conversation even happened, which is just laughable in retrospect. But in the moment, that's how it worked for me. So I had to force myself to learn how to be a better communicator and to not, jump ahead of myself in that sense and be an overthinker as I've always been.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's so common. Overthinking
Yeah.
is something that so many of us do. And
Yeah.
but you're right, it ultimately we're having these thoughts about something that isn't a reality.
Yeah.
It isn't true yet, and it may never
Mhm.
be true.
Exactly.
So I know I connected with you on LinkedIn, which is great for business and finding work or just connecting with other businesses. Where else can people find more information about you?
When it comes to me, I have a website. I have a company website and I'm on Instagram. Though most of my information is on LinkedIn, but for people who kind of like, more memes, maybe there's Instagram and a more detailed overview of what I do on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. This was a great conversation.
So, one of the things that I have not mentioned yet is that about 3 months ago, I went from freelancing as a content marketing writer to taking on a full time position at a local company. Fortunately for me, this company follows a hybrid model. So I'm working from home as well as the office, and they offer a lot of flexibility. So, in a lot of ways, it's a company that does help you prioritize your health. That doesn't mean that it doesn't come without some adjustment. I've been working from home for 5 years. So working from home made it easier for me to have a morning yoga routine and a meditation routine. With a new job, 3 days a week, I'm traveling in and I'm commuting for almost an hour. So that takes a bit of time away. There's also, it's a larger company than I've worked for in the past. So there's a lot of new faces to meet, a lot of adjustments to be made. One of the things that has been happening with me is that I immediately dropped all of the things that keep me healthy, sane, and feeling good. So the yoga routine went out the window. And I immediately started feeling physically out of alignment and could feel the pain from sitting all day setting in. Though I should say that the company does offer standing, adjustable standing sit desks. So, this is a great company. They are very much trying to help people with their health and wellness. So, my point in saying all of this is that no matter what situation we find ourselves in terms of the work that we're doing or the responsibilities that we have during our day, it really is up to us to prioritize our health and wellness. We have to advocate for ourselves. And as I said, this is a big transition moment for me. And so things went awry, but now I'm going to intentionally pick up the pieces and start to implement those things that have helped keep me grounded and present and overall healthy and well. I think the most important thing to do when things do go off track, because they will, is to not allow yourself to go into a shame spiral or to have ways to quickly pull yourself out of one, because it's that descent into shame and learned helplessness that keeps us stuck in self-sabotaging behaviors. So with that, there are just a couple of other things I wanted to mention before I wrap up this episode. The first is that there's a new feature on the podcast where if you look at the show notes, there's a link where you can text me your opinions, thoughts, questions, anything you want to tell me. It's a one-way communication, so I won't be able to directly respond to you through that method. But if you have a question that you want to ask that I can help answer on the podcast, please send it my way that way. This is an interesting feature too, because one of the things that I'm finding is that I've wanted to give more context in episodes that I'm doing, and I've wanted to do more solo episodes as well. But I find it harder to do that than to do the interviews because I tend to have very responsive energy, which means I need someone to say something or do something in order to respond to that. Does not mean I don't have my own opinions, but this is often why I think I can be labeled as a quieter person. In the past, possibly labeled as a shy person. But it's not really about shyness or not having an opinion. It's really about needing someone else's energy to respond to. So if you have something on your mind that you really want to have discussed on the podcast, I would love to have you send me a text through that link in the show notes, or you can send me an email. And finally, here's a short clip of something I recorded the other day about these fun Magic of What If cards that my friend Shannon Danielle is offering. I wanted to share something kind of fun and exciting. My friend Shannon Danielle, who was a guest on the podcast during season 1, has created these amazing cards. They're called the Magic of What If cards. And she says that you can pull a card each day and think about the question in a couple of different ways. And the deck actually gives suggestions about how to use the cards. But I thought it'd be fun to pull one of the cards and give you an idea of what these cards can really do for you. So here we go. And we have, what if I easily expand my capacity to receive? So the very first thing that comes up for me when I read this question is actually resistance. So the first thing that I think is, who am I to receive? And I think that's probably a pretty common reaction to the idea of welcoming in someone else's generosity. You know, living in a very individualistic society, and we love to say to ourselves, like, I am super strong and I can do everything myself. Um, and maybe that's true that a lot of the time you can do for yourself, and we want to do for ourselves because it makes us feel powerful. But there's really great joy in allowing other people to give to you. It lets them feel a sense of love for you that may be their love language is to give to you. It's an interesting way to look at it, but when you deny someone that, you're taking something away from them. So, what if I easily expand my capacity to receive? This could also apply when you're thinking about simply receiving good things from life in general. Some people would say that from the universe. If you have a great day, can you receive that? Can you open up to it being a great day and really enjoying it? I think a lot of times for me, resistance comes in the form of, I'll feel that good thing come to me and I'll enjoy it for just a little while, but then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, the next thing is going to happen. Something bad will happen next. And I think that's unfortunate. And I don't know that I've really resolved that for myself, but I think that's the beauty of these cards is that if you take one from the deck each day, think about it as you're going about your day. You don't necessarily have to focus on it intently. You can actually ask the question in the morning and let it sit. Let it just sit in your subconscious. And you may see answers or hear answers throughout the day. So I love these cards. Shannon she's just got great energy. I mean, she is putting so much love into the world and into the people that she's working with. So I really wanted to, shout these out and give everybody the link to where they can get them if this is something they think will be beneficial to them. You can find the Magic of What If cards at purepossibilities.net, and I will be sure to include that in today's show notes. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. You can also find more about each episode on the website at wellnessinachaoticworld.com. Or you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, where we can chat more about living well in this stressed out, chaotic world. And as always, I hope you have a healthy, happy week. If today's episode resonated with you, our private Facebook group is a great place to dive deeper, ask questions, and share wins with people who understand. It's free, it's private, and you can join by clicking the link in the episode description. I hope to see you there.